The jungle breathed a hot, wet breath against the faces of Ghost Team. It was a moonless night in the tangled heart of a forgotten Southeast Asian valley, a place where maps were more suggestion than science. The air, thick with the scent of decaying leaves and cloying blossoms, was violently split apart by the staccato rip of a K-47s in the deeper, more authoritative answer of American-made rifles. This was not supposed to happen. The mission was simple: a quiet insertion, recon on a suspected insurgent training camp, and a silent extraction before sunrise. But somewhere, somehow, the plan had gone catastrophically wrong. Led by Lieutenant Marcus Thorne, a man whose jaw seemed permanently set in a grim line of determination, the six-man Navy SEAL team was caught in a classic L-shaped ambush. They had moved into a narrow ravine, and the enemy had sprung the trap from the ridges above, pinning them against a sheer rock face. Bullets chewed at the earth around them, splintering ancient trees and kicking up fistfuls of mud. The metallic taste of fear and cordite filled their mouths. Ghost lead to Archangel. "We are pinned down. I repeat, pinned down." Thorne's voice, usually a steady baritone, was strained, punctuated by the gasp of exertion as he slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle. "Coordinates grid 34 Delta. We are taking heavy, effective fire from multiple elevated positions. 2 wounded. Ammunition critical." The radio crackled back, the signal fighting through the dense canopy and miles of unforgiving terrain. The voice from the forward operating base, their lifeline codenamed Archangel, was laced with the static of distance and the sterile calm of someone staring at a screen, far removed from the chaos. "Solid copy, Ghost Lead. Air support is inbound, but they're ETS. 90 minutes. Hold your position. 90 minutes." In a firefight like this, that was a death sentence. Another SEAL, a young corpsman nicknamed Doc, grunted as a round ricocheted off the rock near his head, showering him with stone fragments. 90 minutes? "We'll be ghosts for real by then," he yelled over the din. Thorne keyed his mic again, his desperation bleeding through. "Archangel, that's not good enough. They're tightening the noose. We can't hold for 90. A momentary pause on the other end. The standard procedure would be another platitude. Do your best, and hold on. But what came next was different. The calm, almost detached male voice of the primary watch officer was replaced by a new one. It was female, her tone shockingly serene, carrying an authority that seemed to cut through the static and the panic. It was a voice that didn't promise. It stated, "Ghost Lead, this is Archangel Actual," the voice said, smooth as polished steel. "Disregard previous. I'm handling it. Just keep their heads down." A wave of confusion washed over Thorne. He had never heard that voice, that call sign, during any of their briefings. Who was Archangel Actual? He glanced at his men, their faces grim under the intermittent muzzle flashes. They were soldiers, trained to follow orders, but the order they had just received felt less like a command and more like a prophecy. In the heart of the roaring jungle, surrounded by death, the most profound mystery was the identity of the calm woman who had just promised them a miracle. Miles away, in the cold, sterile hum of the forward operating base's command center, Anya Sharma stared at the tactical map. At 31, she had a compact, wiry strength that seemed coiled and ready, a stark contrast to the bland, khaki-colored world of her current role. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, functional bun, and her sharp, intelligent green eyes, the color of sea glass, missed nothing. Those eyes at once looked down the scope of a .50 caliber rifle from over a mile away, guiding a bullet to its target with preternatural skill. But that was a lifetime ago. 3 years had passed since the covert mission in Afghanistan went sideways. Officially, it was a success. Unofficially, it cost her everything. A calculated risk, a direct order she had questioned, and a political fallout that required a scapegoat. She wasn't dishonorably discharged. Her record was too exemplary for that, but she was quietly and effectively neutered. Reassigned to technical and signals intelligence support, she was a ghost of a different kind, haunting the periphery of the world she once dominated. The younger SEALs, fresh from Bud S and filled with testosterone-fueled bravado, saw her as little more than a glorified radio operator. They walked past her station with a casual swagger, their talk filled with the exploits she was no longer a part of. They didn't know that the quiet woman tracking their satellite feeds held the record for the longest confirmed sniper kill in Joint Special Operations history. They didn't know she could field strip their own weapons blindfolded, or that she spoke 3 languages fluently. To them, she was just Anya, the techie who made sure their comms worked. The subtle humiliation was a constant, low-grade ache. Being excluded from mission briefings, her tactical suggestions politely ignored by commanders half her age and a fraction of her experience, it all chipped away at her. Yet, she maintained a quiet, unwavering professionalism. She did her job with meticulous precision, her focus absolute. But beneath the calm exterior, the warrior was still there, haunted by the ghosts of her past and restless in her forced exile. She was a finely tuned weapon locked in an armory, gathering dust while the war raged on just outside the door. The frantic radio transmissions from Ghost Team were a physical blow. Each burst of static, each strained voice shouting ammunition counts, was a ghost of her own past missions. The escalating panic, the shrinking perimeter, the chilling certainty of being overwhelmed, it was a symphony of dread she knew all too well. It stirred the cold ashes of that final mission in Afghanistan, where she had been the one on the ground, pinned down, praying for an angel that never came. She watched the satellite feed, her screen displaying the grim geometry of the ambush. Red icons, representing the enemy, were methodically closing in on the 6 blue icons of Ghost Team, a classic pincer movement, efficient, lethal. She could see the enemy's strategy as clearly as if they'd de-drawn it for her. They were cutting off every escape route, patiently bleeding the SEALs dry before the final, overwhelming assault. Protocol demanded she sit here. Protocol demanded she trust the chain of command, trust the 90-minute ETA support. Her job was to monitor, report, and stay out of the way. Disobeying that would mean, at best, a dishonorable discharge. At worst, a court-martial and prison. Her career, her reputation, everything she had rebuilt in her quiet exile would be gone. But as another desperate plea for support crackled over the speakers, something inside her snapped. It wasn't a choice, not really. It was an instinct, a primal imperative that screamed louder than any regulation. You do not leave your people to die. Not on your watch. With a resolve that settled over her like a shroud, she stood up. She walked away from her console, ignoring the questioning glance of her superior officer. Her steps were silent and sure as she moved through the back corridors of the base, toward a small, forgotten storage locker in the armory annex. Inside, under a dusty canvas sheet, was a relic of her former life, her M200 intervention rifle. It wasn't standard issue. It was hers. The stock was custom molded to her shoulder, the trigger pull calibrated to a whisper light 2 pounds, the optics a state-of-the-art system she had acquired through unofficial channels. Running her hand over the cold, familiar steel was like shaking hands with an old friend. This rifle had been an extension of her will, a conduit for her focus and skill. It had been silent for 3 years. Tonight, it would speak again. She gathered the weapon, several magazines of 408 Chetak ammunition, and a ghillie suit, her movements economical and practiced. She was no longer Anya Sharma, the tech support analyst. She was a sniper, and she was going to war. Melting into the jungle that bordered the base was the easy part. The true challenge lay ahead. Anya moved with a practiced, ghostly silence, her feet instinctively finding purchase on the slick, root-choked ground. She was a predator in her element, her senses alive to the cacophony of the jungle night. The chirps of insects, the distant call of a night bird, the rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth. It was all information, a living map that told her where she was and what was around her. She had the SEAL team's coordinates burned into her memory and a GPS unit strapped to her wrist, but she navigated primarily by instinct and the faint rhythmic sound of gunfire that now carried on the humid air. Time was her enemy. Every minute that passed, the enemy's net drew tighter around Ghost Team. She pushed herself harder, her breath coming in controlled, silent pants, her customized rifle feeling perfectly balanced across her back. The enemy's pincer movement was closing from the east and west, designed to crush the SEALs against the rock face behind them. But Anya's analysis back at the base had revealed a potential flaw in their plan. A kilometer to the south of the ravine was a steep, rocky outcropping, a jagged spire of stone that rose above the canopy. It was a treacherous climb, especially in the dark, but if she could reach the summit, it would give her a perfect, unobstructed overwatch position on the entire engagement area. It was a tactical godsend, a sniper's throne. Reaching the base of the outcropping, she paused, listening. The sounds of the firefight were louder now, closer. She didn't have much time. She slung her rifle securely and began to climb. The rock face was nearly sheer, its surface slick with moss and moisture. Her fingers, strong and sure, found tiny crevices and holds, her body moving with the fluid grace of a climber who had spent countless hours honing her skills. Her lungs burned, and her muscles screamed in protest, but she ignored the pain. The adrenaline of purpose was afire in her veins. Minutes later, she hauled herself over the final ledge, collapsing onto the small, flat summit. She was breathing heavily, but her mind was already working, scanning the battlefield below. She had made it. Through her rifle scope, she could see the flashes of Ghost Team's muzzles, desperately returning fire. And she could see the enemy, moving with confidence, preparing for their final push. They had no idea they were being watched. With practiced economy of motion, she deployed the bipod of her M200, chambered around, and settled her cheek against the cool stock. She had minutes, maybe seconds, to spare. From her elevated perch, the battlefield was laid out before her, like a deadly chessboard. Anya's breathing slowed, her heart rate dropping to a steady, rhythmic beat. The chaos below faded into a series of calm, mathematical problems. Each enemy fighter was a variable, a target with a specific value. She didn't think of them as men. She thought of them as threats to be neutralized. Her first target was a man on the eastern ridge, slightly behind the main assault line, shouting orders and pointing. A commander. Eliminating him would sow confusion and break their command structure. She adjusted for the slight crosswind, exhaled half a breath, and held. The world narrowed to the space inside her scope. The rifle bucked against her shoulder with a suppressed, heavy thump, a sound swallowed by the jungle. A half-second later, the commander crumpled to the ground, his orders cut short. Panic rippled through the enemy ranks. Anya didn't wait. Her gaze shifted, identifying the next critical target, a heavy machine gunner who was methodically chewing up the SEAL's cover. She acquired the target, her crosshairs settling on the gunner's chest. Another whisper-quiet shot, another threat eliminated. The devastating machine gun fell silent. She worked with a terrifying efficiency, a surgeon excising a cancer. A squad leader here, a grenadier there. Each shot was a masterpiece of physics and instinct. She was breaking the back of the assault, disrupting their coordination, giving Thorne and his men the breathing room they so desperately needed. Below, the SEALs, initially confused by the sudden implosion of the enemy's leadership, quickly realized what was happening. They capitalized on the chaos, laying down a more effective base of fire, beginning to push back. The momentum of the battle had shifted. But the enemy was not composed of fools. They realized they were being targeted from a superior position. Anya saw two fighters break off from the main group, melting into the jungle at the base of her outcropping. They were coming for her, a flanking maneuver. She smoothly transitioned, slinging her rifle over her back and drawing the 10-inch combat knife from the sheath on her vest. She couldn't risk a gunshot giving away her exact position. She moved to the edge of the summit just as the first fighter's head appeared over the ledge. Before he could even register her presence, she struck, a swift, silent motion that ended his climb permanently. His partner, hearing the scuffle, scrambled up faster, his rifle raised. Anya met him head-on, using his own momentum against him. A brutal, close-quarters struggle ended in seconds. Silence returned, broken only by the distant, now faltering sounds of the main firefight. She crawled back to her firing position, her heart hammering not from fear, but from the primal surge of combat. Looking through her scope, she saw the remaining enemy fighters were disorganized, their will to fight broken. They were beginning to retreat, melting back into the jungle they had emerged from. The immediate threat was over. Anya remained in her overwatch position, her rifle trained on the silent jungle, long after the last enemy fighter had vanished. She meticulously scanned the area, ensuring no stragglers were lying in wait, no secondary ambush was being set. Only when she was absolutely certain the threat was neutralized did she key the small, encrypted radio she brought with her. Ghost lead, this is Archangel Actual. The area is secure. Recommend you prep for extraction at the primary LZ. Stay vigilant. Thorne's voice, when it came back, was filled with a mixture of exhaustion and awe. Archangel Actual, thank you. Solid copy. We're moving. Anya listened as the sounds of the approaching extraction helicopter grew from a distant whir to a powerful downdraft. She watched as Ghost Team, carrying their wounded, were lifted into the sky and away from the Valley of Death. Her job was done. Her return to base was the reverse of her departure. Silent, methodical, and completely undetected. She slipped through the perimeter fence like a phantom, her ghillie suit blending perfectly with the shadows. In the armory, she cleaned her M20 with the care of a religious rite, removing every trace of its recent use. She replaced it in its locker, buried it under its dusty canvas shroud, and walked back to the command center. She slipped into her chair just as the first rays of dawn were breaking the horizon, looking for all the world like a tech who had simply been on a long coffee break. The next morning, the base was buzzing with the story of Ghost Team's miraculous survival. The official report was vague, attributing the enemy's sudden, disorganized retreat to superior SEAL tactics and a breakdown in enemy command. No one mentioned a sniper. Later that day, Commander Eva Rostova, Thorne's direct superior and the iron-willed leader of the entire SEAL contingent, walked into the command center. She moved with a quiet purpose, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on Anya. She walked over to Anya's console, placing a single, spent .408 Chaitak rifle casing on the desk. It was still warm. Their eyes met. Not a word was spoken, but everything was understood. Rostova knew. In that silent exchange, a debt was acknowledged and a profound respect was forged. "I'm putting you in for combat recertification," Rostova said, her voice low enough for only Anya to hear. "Your talents are wasted here." She then turned and walked away, leaving the spent casing on the desk as a silent, gleaming testament to the night's work. There was no formal ceremony, no announcement. Anya Sharma's name simply reappeared on the active combat rosters. It was a quiet, bureaucratic change that sent seismic waves through the base's social structure. The younger SEALs, who had once walked past her with dismissive indifference, now looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. Whispers followed her down hallways. The legend of the Angel of the Valley, the mysterious sniper who had saved Ghost Team, began to grow. and all eyes turned to the quiet techie who was suddenly back on the board. One afternoon, as she was calibrating a satellite uplink, Sergeant Wrecker Davies, a mountain of a man who was Ghost Team's heavy weapons specialist, approached her. He was one of the men who had been most dismissive of her in the past. He stood awkwardly for a moment, his usual bravado gone. "Ma'am," he began, the word feeling strange on his tongue. We just wanted to say we were wrong about you. We underestimated you. And thank you." Anya looked up from her work, her green eyes meeting his. She could have been smug. She could have reminded him of his past condescension. Instead, she offered a small, understanding smile. "Don't worry about it, Sergeant," she said softly. "The most dangerous people are the ones you never see coming. Just do me a favor. Stay sharp out there." He nodded, a look of genuine gratitude on his face, and left her to her work. The apology was more meaningful than any medal. It was an acknowledgement not just of her skill, but of her right to be there. She felt a sense of peace settle over her, a feeling that had been absent for 3 long years. She was no longer a ghost haunting the edges of her own life. She was a warrior, her purpose reclaimed, her place among her comrades restored. She was home. Days later, Anya stood alone at the base's long-distance shooting range, the familiar weight of her M200 resting on its bipod. She wasn't firing. She was just looking downrange, contemplating the events of the past week. She had broken every rule in the book. She had risked her freedom and her future on a single, instinctive decision. And she would do it again in a heartbeat. The incident had reaffirmed a core belief that sometimes the only thing standing between order and chaos, between life and death, is one person's willingness to act, to step outside the rigid lines of protocol and do what is right. She resolved then and there to be more than just a trigger puller. She would mentor the younger operators, not just in shooting, but in the things that couldn't be taught in a classroom: situational awareness, the art of patience, and the courage to trust one's gut when all other indicators fail. Her legacy wouldn't just be a list of confirmed kills. It would be in the lives she saved and the soldiers she helped to forge. The world needs its heroes, the ones who stand on stages and receive medals. But it also needs its silent guardians, its unseen protectors who operate in the shadows, who ask for no recognition and seek no reward beyond the success of the mission and the safety of their comrades. Anya Sharma was one of these guardians. As she packed up her rifle, the setting sun casting long shadows across the range, she felt a profound sense of contentment. She had found her purpose, not in the roar of acclaim, but in the quiet echo of a single, decisive shot fired in the dark. This story is a powerful reminder that true strength and capability often reside where we least expect them. It teaches us not to judge a book by its cover, and to recognize that past experiences, even painful ones, forge us into who we are meant to be. Anya's journey shows us that sometimes following your instinct and your conscience is more important than following the rules, especially when the lives of others are at stake. It's a lesson in courage, integrity, and the quiet power of a purpose reclaimed. What does this story make you think about? Have you ever felt underestimated only to prove your worth when it mattered most? Or have you ever been on the other side, surprised by the hidden depths of someone you thought you knew? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. I wish you all good health, a clear mind, and the courage to act when your moment comes. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content that explores the depths of the human spirit. Until next time.